It's 17 to 8, and a shortage of coal has seen a 3-month closure of one of WA's biggest power plants, the Collie Coal Station. The station supplies electricity to the southwest interconnected system, which includes Perth, Kalbarri, Kalgoorlie and Albany. The goldfields in particular are prone to blackouts. We saw repeated ones in February and May this year. Energy Minister Bill Johnston says the closure shouldn't be a cause for concern, but Shadow Minister for Energy and WA Liberal Party leader Dr David Honey disagrees. He's with us now. Dr Honey, good morning.
Oh, good morning, Terry, and good morning to your listeners.
Thank you. Yes, so this is what the Energy Minister had to say.
One of the reasons that they've decided that they need to exercise those is that the two coal companies are finding it difficult to produce coal. West Australians should not be any more worried about blackouts this summer than any previous summer.
You don't think this is the case, though, Dr Honey. You think we should be worried. Why is this?
Well, I don't want people to worry unnecessarily, but I guess there's a couple of factors here. The first one is, the coal shortage for the government-owned power stations, so the Collie and the Muja power stations. And the second confounding factor is that there's a privately owned power station, Blue Waters, at Collie as well, that provides a substantial amount of power. Now, I think your listeners would probably know by now that Griffin Coal, who supplies the coal to the Blue Waters power station, is having financial difficulties. And in fact, they've gone into administration to try and help them through that sort of financial period. But what we hear from the government, and we hear from South 32 as well, is that the situation's so dire with Griffin that they're actually considering importing coal from the eastern states. Now, if Blue Water went out as well, we'd be in quite a difficult situation coming into summer for power capacity. And the real question is, how have we got here?
So what would you like to see done?
Oh, look, I think that there's two things. One, Premier Coal, back in 2005, Premier Alan Carpenter in the day signed an exclusive contractual arrangement with Premier Coal between the government-owned power stations and that coal mine to provide coal. Now, that's a contract, an enforceable contract, and the government should be doing everything within their power to ensure and to enforce that contract with Premier that they have to supply adequate coal. Now, you may have heard from the Minister, I read in the paper today, the Minister's finally come out and explained that he said there was an accident that caused the problem, and apparently there was a bulldozer slide in a mine pit, and that disrupted production for 10 days. But gosh, if our power supply from those government-owned stations is that critical that a 10-day delay in disruption means you have to shut a power station down? And can I also say it appears that one of the Muja stations is constantly not running as well. Then we're in a really perilous situation in coal supplies, and that hasn't happened overnight. That's have to have been the case for months that we've been getting into this position. Minister Johnson's the Minister for Energy. He's also the Minister for Mines. I mean, it's his job to make sure that we have adequate coal supplies. And as I say, given the situation that exists for Blue Waters as well, that puts us in a difficult position. And there's an organisation called the Australian Energy Market Operator that advises government on what demand will be and also whether there's sufficient capacity to meet that demand for electricity. They have a reserve capacity target. And when the Collie station shut down, then the generation capacity is right on what they say is the amount of capacity we need to guarantee reliable power. If the Blue Water station was to cease production, or there was to be a problem with one of the other power stations, we'd be significantly below that reserve capacity target. Now, that won't probably be a big issue in these cooler months of spring, but as you alluded to in your introduction, everyone remembers last Christmas. Before Christmas, we had that hot weather. Now, the network didn't cope at all. Minister Johnson, in that case, said, that was due to some line issues and some other issues. But obviously, if we don't have the generation capacity, we can be in a similar situation.
On ABC Goldfields Midwest and Wheat Belt, I'm speaking with Dr. David Honey. He's the Shadow Minister for Energy and the WA Liberal Party leader. Now, Dr. Honey, you did hold an energy forum in Kalgoorlie back in a few months back. I want to know what's come of that. I know that no state government or energy providers were a part of that one. So, yeah, keen to know what came of that one.
No, look, Terry, actually, I think it was a really good result, not just because of that forum, but I think, good pressure from the Shire and concerned residents in the community. We had a situation in Kalgoorlie. Kalgoorlie's actually quite well placed. There's a privately owned backup gas-fired power, a diesel-fired power station as it is. It's a turbine. But also Synergy have a power station there to provide all of the backup capacity they need. Now, the government had a policy that unless an outage was going to be greater than 2 hours, they wouldn't bring that backup power station on. And then, of course, if they'd experienced difficulty bringing it on, which was the case in both the outages you mentioned, then you ended up with really substantial delays in power coming back on for customers. And following following that forum, and also following concern from the Shire and from the community, the government have changed that policy. So now, if there's any outage, they bring that reserve capacity on straight away, and that means customers in Kalgoorlie should experience far fewer disruptions. And look, I think particularly given that we've got these coal shortage issues looming and the potential problems with blue water, the government needs to double down and make sure that that reserve capacity through Synergy, but as I said, there's also another power station, a privately owned power station, that they're in tip-top shape and ready to go in case there are any disruptions in the Kalgoorlie and that surrounding area.
In a similar vein, in the past month in the goldfields, two major mining companies, Bellevue Gold in Leinster and Liontown Resources in the Kathleen Valley, they both approved massive off-grid hybrid power stations with wind and solar. So do you think that the private sector, in terms of mining, should do things like this, maybe step away from coal to take pressure off the grid?
Look, I think that's happening already. You'd know because of all of the people you talk to, that all of the mining companies, really from the small ones through to the major mining companies, are all seeing how they can decarbonise their operations. And I think particularly for a lot of the mines around Kalgoorlie, the gold mines and those, they're relatively smaller mines. They have a real capacity to go off-grid, and obviously that gives capacity. I mean, even the super pit actually runs off the grid, and then there's a Parkeston power station which acts as a backup for them in case there's a disruption to the grid as well. So, that's going to help, and we're going to see progressively more storage capacity built. Having said that, there is really no technology at this stage for the longer-term outages, outages that go more than a couple of hours. You really can't rely on battery storage, and you're going to have gas turbine or some other long-term backup. Now, given you've only got that single line coming really all the way from Muja to Kalgoorlie through a couple of loops, that's a vulnerability that's there all the time. So I think it'll be some time before renewables can provide long-term reliable backup, but certainly they can take some of the load off the grid in normal circumstances.
Yeah, and just finally, you have mentioned better support and so forth in this area. I do want to know how much of this for you is genuine concern for a region that's quite far away from you, over just looking at Minister Johnston's comments and taking the opposite direction.
Oh, look, it's a real concern for me. I grew up in the bush. I grew up in the Central Great Southern, a little farm out west of Cranbrook down in the southwest. So, I've got a deep empathy for people in regional areas. And one thing I can see, and it comes very clear when you look at the policies that government has applied to the regional areas, is that they're regarded as second-class citizens, and I think that's unacceptable. Kalgoorlie, I think for all regional customers, but particularly those big regional centres, Kalgoorlie's a city. That's a big regional centre, and can I say, absolutely critical to the financial well-being of the state. I mean, the Kalgoorlie contributes very substantially to our state economy, which contributes to the lifestyle that the people in Perth enjoy. They should expect the same power reliability. Now, the standards that Western Power applies, they accept, I think it's around double the number of outages in the country they say is acceptable versus people in the city. Well, I don't think that should be acceptable, and particularly in the larger regional centres. The larger regional centres should have exactly the same power reliability you have in a suburb in Perth, and perhaps even more so given the economic significance of that region.
Dr. Honey, thanks for joining us on the program this morning.
Cheers, Kerry. Thank you very much.
That was Dr. David Honey, Shadow Minister for Energy and the WA Liberal Party leader. I did contact the Energy Minister, Bill Johnston's office, to join us on the program as well, and they did provide some statements that stick to what has been out in the news already, but I will keep trying to get their comment too. It is